So, a very warm welcome to SNS and today's seminar that will focus on the relationship between skills and global value chains. My name is Mikael Witteblad and I am the head of the research program here at SNS. I manage a 3-year project on the future supply of skills, and this seminar is part of that project. Globalization and its implication on the labor market is a natural focal point of this project. Globalization has entered a new phase. The production of goods and services is becoming more specialized and dispersed. Value chains have made production more efficient. Where in the global value chain a country places itself depends largely on the skills of the workforce. So, how can globalization work for everyone? What efforts are required to meet companies' need for skilled, competitive labor? And what measures can increase the ability to retrain people? These are some of the questions that for today's seminar. We are very happy to have Stéphanie Jamet, senior economist at OECD here. Stéphanie will give us the highlights of the latest OECD Skills Outlook 2017, which is titled Skills and Global Value Chains. We are also pleased to have Fredrik Sjöholm, Professor of Economics at Lund University with us. Fredrik is also an affiliated researcher at the Research Institute of Industrial Economics and will today provide us with an in-depth view of how global value chains affect the Swedish labor market. We also welcome Karin Ljunggren, who is business partner at ABB. Karin joins us to share the experience of ABB's with regard to working with global value chains. To lead today's seminar, we are once again pleased to have Helena Blomquist with us. Helena is a renowned journalist, as she has many years of experience working at, for example, Swedish television, SVT. A warm welcome to you, Helena, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. What an introduction. What else is needed to be said? Almost nothing except that I'm very glad to have you all here. It's nice to see so many of you, and you will have the opportunity to ask questions further on, so prepare for that. We have 1 hour and 15 minutes, 1 hour and 10 minutes now to go. And you can already go on Twitter if you want to, and then it is hashtag SNS Kunskap, hashtag SNS Kunskap in one word. You have it there if you can see it. I think we should begin right now, and the subject is what role do skills play in global value chains? And first of all, we have the presentation of the OECD Skills Outlook report for 2017, and as Mikael said, the name is of the report Skills and Global Value Chains. So give a big hand to Stéphanie Jamet. Welcome up on stage. Welcome. I should also say that you are a senior economist at OECD.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this invitation. So I'm going to present you the last edition of the Skills Outlook 2017. And I want to tell you that especially for this occasion, we have prepared a country note on Sweden that you can see on the website, the OECD website. So we are going to talk about global value chains. This is the new wave of globalization, and what I'm going to tell you is that this new wave of globalization has put people at the center of globalization. So we often represent global value chains through the smiling curve. So this is a smiling curve. This is all the activities that contribute to the production of a good. So it starts from R&D activities, then you have some design activities, some logistics, then the various components of a good are produced, assembled together, then the product is put to the market, and then you have some service activities after the product has been sold. What is new is now that many people from different countries contribute to the production of the same good. So there is not anymore an exposed sector to competition, to globalization, and a sheltered sector. Now any worker can benefit or suffer from globalization, and labor markets have become very much interrelated. The way we measure global value chains now is through an OECD WTO database, which is called the Trade in Value Added database. The idea is now that firms are part of a global value chains. So they receive some intermediate from a countries, they work on this intermediate, and then they re-export this good to another countries. So it means that when you look at the exports of a countries, there is part of the value added that comes from abroad. And if you look at the share of the value of exports that comes from abroad, this gives you an indication of countries' participation in global value chains. So here you have all OECD countries, and you can see that Sweden is relatively in the middle with an average participation in global value chains. We can look at what it means in terms of jobs. How many jobs are related to these global value chains? How many jobs are in the end sustained by foreign final demand? This is what you can see on this chart. So for Sweden, there is 45% of jobs in the business sector that are not sustained by foreign final demand. So this gives you an indication of the extent to which labor markets can be affected by demand in other countries. So this is a very important effect. So global value chains, they are there, they have developed, and what we show in this publication is that through the skills of their population, through their skills policies, countries can influence the impact that global value chains will have on their economies. And they can do that through several channels. The first one is that global value chains, as you mentioned, can lead to some productivity gains because countries can specialize in those activities where they are the better at. But and also workers, they work on goods that include some technologies that come from abroad. So they can become more efficient in contact of this technology, but they need to have the skills to be able to learn from this technology. So you need to have the skills to be able to realize the productivity gains that are possible through global value chains. Another channel is that, of course, some jobs will be offshored. Some workers are exposed to the risk of losing their jobs. But with the skills, the skills can protect workers against the negative impact of global value chains. The third channel is that skills are very important for countries to specialize in these advanced industries and services. If I show you the smiling curves, countries, they don't want to stay at the production stage. They want to move on the global value chains at the R&D part or at services after the product has been sold, because these are the activities that bring the biggest value to countries. So they want to upgrade, and they need to have the skills to be able to specialize in these more technology advanced industries. So I'm going to show you right now two statistics on these first two aspects, and I will come back a bit longer on the third one. We have estimated the gains in terms of productivity that countries can get by participation in global value chains. So here you have the productivity gains, annual productivity gains at an industry level. And in fact, they depend on the industry. You have some industries where the potential for fragmentation of the good is not large. This is the bottom part. And you have some production where you can fragment the production process and send the various stages in various countries. So here you can have bigger productivity gains. Overall, these are the average gain in productivity growth for countries that have increased their participation in global value chains the most. And we look at several indicators of participation in global value chains. This is the horizontal axis. So there are substantial gains. But what is important is that we have also looked at the role of skills to achieve these productivity gains. And in fact, the countries that enter global value chains with a more educated labor force manage to achieve bigger productivity gains in those industries that are the most fragmented. So skills, they matter to realize these productivity gains. Then I said that skills can protect workers against the potential negative impact of global value chains. So I'm going to talk about job quality. And we measure job quality through various aspects. Earning quality, the level, the distribution of earning. Labor market security, the risk of being unemployed. The income support when you are unemployed. And the quality of the working environment. And I'm going to concentrate on this latter aspect, the quality of the working environment. Here on the vertical axis, you have the gap in the quality of the working environment for highly educated workers and low educated workers. So you can see that for all countries it's positive because in all countries, highly educated workers enjoy a better quality at the job quality. And countries at the bottom, there are those countries where this gap is the smallest. Countries at the top where the gap is bigger. And on the horizontal axis, you have an indicator of countries' participation in global value chains. So you can see that there is a positive trend. In countries that are more integrated in global value chains, the gap in job quality between the highly educated and the low educated is bigger. So job polarization tends to get bigger when countries participate in global value chains. This is why if you have a low share of low-skilled workers, then you have less people exposed to this risk of low job quality. So this is to summarize a bit the idea of the report. So these are the skills, and this is the global value chain that I've shown you in the beginning. So the main message is that countries, they need skills to participate in global value chains, to start at the production level. They also need skills to specialize in those high-tech industries and climb the global value chains. If they do so, then they will realize some productivity gains. If in addition, there is a small share of low-skilled workers, then this participation in global value chains can benefit the whole economy. No one will be left behind, and you have more employment growth, more social outcomes. So these are a bit the conditions to make the most of global value chains. And what we have done is that we have built a scoreboard that tries to capture the extent to which countries have the skills to make the most from their participation in global value chains. So it's a scoreboard that has three main components: the skills, participation in global value chains, and economic and social outcomes. Again, it doesn't really mean anything to look only at countries' participation in global value chains. This is not an objective per se. What is important for countries is to translate this participation in global value chains in better economic and social outcome, and that it benefits the whole population. So this is the scoreboard, and it has three blocks. A first block on skill. In terms of skills, we look at whether countries have a limited share of low-skilled workers. We look at whether countries have developed the skills, because to climb the global value chains, countries need to improve their skills. And we look at whether countries have skills, advanced skills, the skills that are needed to specialize in the technology advanced industries. So we have a number of indicators. I'm going to show you just one indicator, which is the share of low performers in literacy or numeracy in OECD countries, according to the Survey of Adult Skills, PIAC. So you can see that in some countries, it's more than 50% of the population that has low literacy and numeracy skills. So this illustrates really the challenge for many countries to make the most from global value chains. Sweden is well placed with a relatively small share of low performers in literacy and numeracy skills, but it's almost 20% in total, so it's not so small. Now I want to come to the parts on the indicator we have to see the extent to which countries are included in global value chains. I have already shown you some indicators. Now I'm going to concentrate on countries' specialization in the most technology advanced industries. And this is really where I think the reports bring some new evidence. We have tried to understand how countries can shape their specialization within global value chains through the skills of their population. So to start with, you don't have to look at everything. In fact, you just have to look at the colors of the charts. You have all the industries ranked from the low-tech industries, less complex business services, and at the bottom, the more complex business services, the high-tech industries. And for each country, you have a gray dot when specialization has decreased, and a green dot when specialization has increased. And what you can clearly see that in all OECD countries, you have more green dots at the bottom. So in all OECD countries, there is a trend toward more specialization in high-tech manufacturing industries, complex business services. So now we want to understand the skills that country needs to be able to specialize in these technology advanced industries. And the most important aspect is that the skills of the population needs to be aligned with the skills requirement of these industries. And there are two important characteristics that we have found. The first one is that all industries, and especially in the context of global value chains, they need workers with a mix of skills. If you take the finance and insurance industry, you need workers with good numeracy skills, say, to perform the accounting task. But you also need workers with good managing and communicating skills because they have to communicate with clients. And if you have part of the activity that has been externalized to other countries, they also need to communicate with workers in other countries. So in all industries, in fact, there is a need to have some what we call strong cognitive skills, but also strong non-cognitive skills, so such as communicating, managing, or social and emotional skills. That's the first aspect. The second aspect is that these most technology advanced industries, they often involve long sequences of tasks. And if you have a worker that doesn't perform well on this task, then it reduces greatly the value of output. So you need to have workers that perform well on their task. And for that, you need to have some qualification that fully reflect what the worker can do. Otherwise, the employer takes someone with a tertiary education degree, and then perhaps the worker doesn't perform well. So that's having workers with qualification that fully reflect what they can do minimizes the risk of having bad surprises for employer when they employ them. So that's the two major aspects that are important to specialize in those technology advanced industry. So now, I'm coming to this. So what we have done is a bit to summarize and look at whether countries' skills characteristic support countries' specialization in these technology advanced industries. So I'm starting, and when we speak about specialization, we look at an indicator, which is the revealed comparative advantage. It's an indicator that captures the extent to which countries export more, are specialized more in an industry relative to other countries and relative to other industries. So I'm starting again with Sweden. So here we can see the column that I've highlighted is whether the country is specialized or not specialized in these industries. And you have only technologically advanced industries. So it's a green dot when the country is specialized. So you can see that Sweden is specialized in many technology advanced industries. Now this is the trend, whether it has increased, decreased. So specialization, a red dot is decrease. So specialization has decreased in the medium high-tech industries, increased in one high-tech manufacturing industries, and mainly increased in complex business services industries. So this is a typical example of a country that is climbing the global value chains, moving from medium high-tech to high-tech manufacturing industries, and even externalizing all the manufacturing industries and concentrating only on business services industries. So now I'm adding what we call the specialization opportunity. So the blue area indicates that the skills of the country support the specialization of the countries. So again, if whether the skills mix of the population is aligned with the need of these industries. And you can see different groups of countries. So first, you have some countries where you have no specialization opportunities. So for instance, take the US, Turkey. In those countries, the skills of their population doesn't support the specialization of the country. So the US economy is very specialized in high-tech industries, but this may come from other type of policies, or this may indicate that in the future it may become difficult to maintain this comparative advantage because this is not supported by the skills of the population. Another example is Turkey. That's a different explanation. Turkey has relatively low skills, is not much specialized in technology advanced industry, so the country will have to upgrade the skills of the population to be able to specialize in these industries. Then you have countries that have several specialization opportunities. So it means that that's fine. I mean, their specialization is supported by the skills of their population. It means they can explore some other specialization if they would like. If we take the case of Sweden, so Sweden, the specialization of Sweden in the medium high-tech industry, so as at the top, is supported by the skills of the population. But the increasing specialization in high-tech manufacturing and in some business complex services, according to our analysis, is not fully supported by the skills of the population. So that's why we recommend some improvement, further improvement in the skills of the Swedish population. Finally, the scoreboard includes a part on social and economic outcomes. We look at whether productivity has increased in country, whether employment outcomes have become better, and whether social outcomes have improved. I'm going to show you just one indicator, which is the change in the Gini coefficient. So an increase in the Gini coefficient is an increase in inequalities. So you have on the vertical axis the change in inequalities. On the horizontal axis, you have countries' participation in global value chains. So you can see that in the group of countries that have increased participation in global value chains, in some of them inequalities have increased, in other inequality have decreased. So this again illustrates the potential role of policies to make the most of global value chains. So I'm showing you the result of the scoreboard. So for each of the indicators, we look at whether countries are among the top performers in green, bottom performer in red, or average in green. So we identify some countries, Germany, Korea, Poland, that have increased their participation in global value chains and have achieved some good economic and social outcomes and have a relatively skilled population. So these countries, they have sized the benefit of their participation in global value chains. Other countries I've mentioned already that haven't fully sized the benefits of global value chains. And I'm coming to Sweden, which will link also a bit to Japan, countries with a high level of skills, but to benefit more from their participation in global value chains, then they need to develop even more their skills. And it's becoming, even when you are already quite specialized in these industries, it's even more difficult to become even more specialized in these technology advanced industries. So the implication for policies. It's a question of improving the quality of education and training systems. It's not anymore a question of having more people with a tertiary education diploma. Now countries, they compete through the skills of their population, not only the level of education. It's about ensuring relevant and reliable qualification. As I've said already, it's important, it's an asset for countries that a diploma fully reflect the qualification of their workers. It's about better connecting the world of learning and the world of work. Countries' comparative advantage, they emerge from the interaction between the skills characteristics and the industry requirements. So bringing the world of learning and the world of work together through, for instance, work-based learning is really crucial. And removing the barrier to further skills development. Workers need to upgrade their skills if they are exposed to the risk of offshoring, but they also need to be confident that they can learn more. Otherwise, they would not accept globalization that we can see in many countries at the moment. As I'm running out of time, I'm not going to show you the statistics. A final implication for skills policies is that countries need to better cooperate on their skills policies. With GVCs makes it harder for countries to recoup their investment in skills. They train some people and they will work in other countries, in other companies. Countries need to better recognize qualification outside. It's important, again, to have this right signal on the qualification and find some financing arrangements that reflect the distribution and the benefits of cost across countries. But policy efforts has to go beyond education and training policies. Countries need to adopt a whole-of-government approach. So first look at the full range of reform that affect the skills of their population, education and training, labor market, firm organization and management practices, migration policies, all these policies that affect the skills of their workers. If they have a country, for instance, with a very good education and training system but restrictive migration policies may not fully benefit from the skills of other countries, for instance. And it's important to coordinate these policies with other type of policies. It's industry, innovation, trade, investment policies. It's also globalization. It's also to be part of what we call the potential, the network for global education, innovation, and research. People cooperate on all these aspects: education, innovation, research. Countries need to be part of this global network. So I'm stopping here and I'm summarizing. To make the most of global value chains, countries need to invest in skills, which means equipping the population with strong mixes of skills, well signaled by qualification, aligned with industry needs. They need to adopt a whole-of-government approach. They need to coordinate these efforts with other policies and to develop international cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Stay on the stage, please. Just if there is any question right now, you can take it later on also. But if there is something you would like to ask right now, you can do it. Okay, you save it. Maybe I should do that as well. But I have one question I just have to ask you. Because in the report it says that since 2002, Sweden participate less than other OECD countries in global value chains. So what conclusion?
No. I mean, it has Sweden has increased less its participation in global value chain than other countries. Mm-hmm. But as we have seen, overall, they participate just in the middle.
Okay.
So in any case, I mean, again, I mean, it's not a question of whether the country participate a lot. I mean, it's not an objective per se. The objective is having the skills to ensure that the participation in global value chains translate into better economic and social outcomes.
Okay.
And on this, the conclusion is that Sweden could benefit more from its participation in global value chains by investing even more in skills.
Okay, but I don't have to worry that much that I did when I read it. Okay, thank you very much. So, thank you and applause once again. So now, to comment on the report, we have Fredrik Sjöholm here. He's a professor of economics at Lunds University. Very welcome.
Tack Helena, and thank you Stéphanie for a very interesting presentation and a solid report. Let's see if my presentation comes up. Well, let me start by just summarizing the kind of message in the report. What it says is basically, 1, participation in global value chains is good, and 2, skills or education is good. I mean, it helps you to integrate in these chains. It also helps you to reap the benefits of participating in these global value chains. I think this is true. Here we go. But I also would like to argue that global value change is not something fundamentally different from what we have seen before, from more traditional kind of organization of production and from the trade that comes from this traditional organization of production. It's more, in my view, a continuation of the globalization that we have seen for the last 50 years or so, with increased specialization. Okay, so we used to, in Sweden, export maybe machinery to other countries. That was good for Sweden. Now we might export parts of that machinery to other countries. That's good for Sweden. It's different, but it's not a fundamental difference. And I think that's important to have in mind to understand both the kind of labor market impacts and also the kind of economic policies that come from this. It's a change, but it's more a continuation with increased specialization that we see. And I in particular think it's important to keep this in mind, to not take this global value change that is present in some industry as an argument for what we could call selective industrial policies. And I think the report maybe implicitly touch upon this idea at some places, that the idea that there are some industries that are better to be engaged in than other industries. I don't think so. I think it's better to have general good economic policies. And as someone else has said, it doesn't matter if we produce computer chips or potato chips as long as the money comes in. And I think that's, the successful Scandinavian countries are kind of proof of that. None of these countries are overly engaged in global value change, with some maybe exaggeration. But I mean, a lot of the success will be based on my raw material intensive industries, paper, wood products in Sweden, oil in Norway, and food industries in Denmark. So avoid selective industrial policies, as a policymaker, try to create a general good business environment, and that also goes for skills and education. It's of course important, but skills in education are important irrespective whether we participate in this global value change or not. But it has impacts, this increased specialization that comes with them. And I think it's interesting to ask the question, why do we see a backlash to globalization now? Why do we see the emergence of some, at least talk about protectionism? I mean, at the same time we know the world has never been better in materialistic terms than it is today. Poverty is low, incomes are high, and so forth. Well, it's because there are winners and losers, okay, within countries. And it used to be the case in a country like Sweden that the losers were low-skilled, blue-collar labor. And we were pretty good at handling that. Okay, so when the textile industry in Borås closed down, the ladies sitting at the sewing machines, they could enter jobs in other industries in the private sector, or perhaps even more common in an expanding public sector. And they got job conditions and wages that were better than they had before. But what has happened now in high-income countries in the last 2 decades or so is that the middle class, parts of the middle class are the ones that are being hurt. And some of them move on to better paid jobs, but there are actually a substantial part of them that actually has to go to lower paid jobs with worse working conditions. So in the literature we talk about job polarization. And we see in many countries that there's a growth of low-wage jobs and there's a growth of high-wage jobs, but there's a stagnation of these mid-wage jobs. And in some countries like US, there's actually a decline in mid-wage jobs. And part of this is caused by this increased specialization that comes from the global value change and comes from other aspects of globalization. So in my own research, we look at the effect of outsourcing, for instance. Okay, and there you see that it has an impact on this, that decline in the mid-wage jobs, or improved matching and the change in organization because of globalization. All of them tend to have this effect of increasing high-wage jobs in particular, but also some low-wage jobs. So the middle class are hurt in some countries by globalization, and this have had a political effect. Okay, so there's a number of really interesting studies now in last year or so, looking at how, for instance, import competition affects the way people vote. So in US, I have a colleague, Karin Ljunggren, who has done an excellent study on US, showing that when there's a high degree of import competition, Democrats tend to vote for more radical Democrats and Republicans for more rightist Republicans. So there's a political polarization because of globalization. There are studies on Europe showing that when import competition increases, nationalism increases, and the support for the popular right increases. So there are political consequences of this globalization that I think we have to start to think about and try to address. So what about economic policies then in this world with increased specialization because of global value change and other aspects of globalization? Well, what we tend to see is that this increases specialization. So instead of producing the whole machine as before, we're producing parts of the machine. There's a specialization in the country. We think that we observed a higher degree of volatility when you have this. So if we only produce a few goods, of course we're going to be hurt quite a lot when the demand for these particular goods falls in the world, for instance. So volatility might increase. And that requires some type of social safety net, okay? You need to have a system that takes care of people when they are out of job. And that's also, of course, important in order to secure the support for globalization, okay? Which relates to the discussion we had previous about the middle class. This is not controversial. I think everyone in here probably agree that we need a social safety system. The difficulties, of course, how to construct one and how big it should be, the extent of the social safety system. Not least since it could be in conflict with the second kind of requirement up here, the need for flexibility. Again, when one sector is hurt, we need to be able to move labor and capital to expanding sectors. Globalization also means that we have slightly less freedom in the economic policies, in the sense that we cannot be substantially worse than other countries in any area. Okay, then investments and production will not be in Sweden. Okay, so all of these firms that we think are Swedish, they have had, a lot of them are not Swedish owned anymore, and those that are, they have had activities all over the world for decades now. And they will place investments and production where it's best for the firm, not for historical reasons or emotional reasons. So if we are worse in some area, if the business environment is worse than in other countries in some area, we have to compensate that by being better in other areas. So there's a little bit of constraint on economic policies in that sense. There's also a constraint that it's becoming more and more difficult to tax. A lot of the tax bases are more mobile, capital, but also parts of labor. And this, of course, is one reason why we abolished the wealth tax and the inheritance tax some years ago, because globalization made it much more difficult to pursue. The big issue now is, of course, corporate taxes. And we have seen a decline in corporate taxes worldwide over the last decades because of globalization. And that's, of course, can be difficult. We need tax revenues, not least to have this social safety system and so forth. That's a requirement for getting support for globalization. But I think, having said that, I want to kind of end on a positive note and saying that overall we can decide on the policies ourselves. Globalization only affects economic policies on the margin, in the sense that good economic policies are good irrespective of what's happening in the rest of the world. And we know what drives economic growth and higher living standards. It's capital accumulation, investment, public and private, labor force participation, technology progress, and so forth. It is, of course, not easy it's difficult to achieve, but at least we own this issue ourselves. Okay, so the fate is, in some sense, in our own hands. So I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Questions are allowed. So just raise your hand when you want to ask a question. Fredrik, Sweden.
Yeah.
What about Sweden? It's a big question, but how should Sweden act to make better off in value?
I think for Sweden, as I try to formulate, I think we should aim for general good economic policies. We should strive to have a good business environment in general. We should avoid saying that, okay, these industries are the future. We should, avoid selective industrial policies. We should strive to have, good infrastructure, good working, good labor market, investments, and technology progress. Policies that foster that, rather than having the idea that we should go for certain industries.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and one of those big questions in Sweden nowadays is what is the challenge? What to do with the challenge migration? How do you connect migration with global value chains?
Well, I don't think there's not any really close connection. What we can say about migration is, first of all, it's not a temporary phenomenon. I think hopefully there will be an end of the war in the Middle East, but there will be a lot of pressure on migration for the foreseeable future. And paradoxically, it's likely because the world is becoming better. And we know it's never the poorest people that migrate. It's the ones that are still poor but a little bit better off. And there are many people in the world now who are a little bit better off and can afford to migrate. So there's going to be a lot of migration pressure in the foreseeable future. I think if you should relate that to global value change, well, what you can say is that there are a lot of ideas that the best way to help people, help refugees, is to try to create economic growth in the neighboring countries, so to speak, where people are. There has been, I think yesterday there was a debattartikel in Svenska Dagbladet on this issue. And here I think multinational firms and global value change can be important. And we've seen, for instance, that in East Asia and Southeast Asia, where there's a large extent of this value change, they have had a tremendous impact on decreasing poverty and increasing living standards for population. So here, if you can have, if these regions can attract labor-intensive economic activities, which is part of this change, then I think people will see rapidly increasing living standards, and I think the migration flow will decline.
Okay. Thank you so much for now. Big hand, please. Oh, we have a question here. Can we save that for the panel discussion? Don't forget it. Thank you very much. Because it's time now for our last guest today, and it's Karin Ljunggren. Former you were a specialist in international assignments, but now you are a human resources business partner at robotics unit at ABB. Welcome.
Okay, can you all hear me? Now, can you hear me? Yeah. So thank you for the opportunity to join this conference and share ABB's views on skills and global value chains. So ABB is a global leader in power and automation technologies. We offer products and services within power and automation for customers within utilities, industry, and transport and infrastructure. ABB is a global company located in over 100 countries with over 135,000 employees. ABB has 4 divisions: power grids, robotics in motion, electrification products, and industrial automation. I work as a HR business partner within the robotics and motion division at the robotics business unit in Västerås, and I will focus my presentation today on robotics. ABB Robotics is present in 53 countries in more than 100 locations. Manufacturing of robots takes place in Europe, Asia, and America, and robotics have over 5,500 employees on a global basis. The first painting robot was introduced in 1969, and today robotics delivers over 300,000 robots worldwide per year. In recent years, robotics have seen a substantial increase in robot sales on a global scale. The chart shows global growth of robot sales. Alongside market growth, competence and skilled employees become a key factor to remain number 1 in the robot market. So ABB recognized that great people and culture is a key factor in building a sustainable and profitable business. Robotics have a people-based strategy, building the best competence, with the aim to provide our businesses where great people turn innovation into customer value every day. ABB also recognized that one of the major differentiators in a global market is competence. Therefore, it is important for us to understand what competences that our organizations have today and what competences that are required for the future to remain a leading company in a global market. So robotics people strategy on building the best competence focus on key factors such as capability mapping and workforce planning, where core knowledge and skills are identified, such as within modularity and automation. The workforce planning is done on a global basis to better understand and manage where to invest in people depending on the jobs. For example, robotics are currently recruiting a larger number of research and development engineers to a modularity project based in Västerås. And the idea is by pulling skilled workers into one location, we can get more speed in the project and effectively increase productivity. Competence mapping is another factor to understand the gap between current and future workforce. And ABB recognized that the requirement of yesterday's workplace differ from tomorrow's workplace, both in terms of skills and knowledge, but also in social behavior and leadership. Another key factor is training provided locally with the aim to close the gap in competence and skills. And ABB, like many other multinational companies, provide internal training and courses for their employees to continuously develop our employees. Reducing retention by providing great opportunities and learning opportunities for our employees is another key factor, alongside increasing job satisfaction and professional development for our employees on a global basis. So robotics have a people strategy in place that will help us understand global value chains and what skills that are required for the future. Our strategy also emphasizes the need to build a sound structure where we provide employees with development and training with aim to reduce retention and increase job satisfaction. However, there are, of course, challenges with building the best competence, of which I would like to highlight a few. So ABB Robotics are currently recruiting on a larger scale within different functions, such as within production, sales, quality, and research and development. The challenge is, however, to find skilled staff in the local market, alongside finding opportunities to access a global recruitment market. For example, at a local level, robotics have challenges to find skilled production managers and workers for our factory in Västerås. Our aim is, of course, to find the best candidates with a good diversity in our recruitment, both in terms of age, gender, and nationality. And robotics have a diversity strategy where we set out that 50% of our managerial positions should be held by women by 2020. In last year, in October 2016, 22% of our managerial positions were held by women, while in April 2017 it had increased to 30%. This can, however, be compared with about 20% of women over our total workforce. And of course, we would like to increase the number of females in our production area and also at robotics in Sweden. Our experience is, however, that more men tend to apply for the kind of specialist jobs that we offer compared to female candidates. Robotics Sweden also strive to decrease our age structure when hiring and to advance young talents early in their career. In April 2017, our average age was 46 years and the youngest potential 27 years old. As a global employer, we have a great need to access a global recruitment platform to attract young talents and female candidates. Robotics also support initiatives where we can hire employees with different nationalities. In April 2017, robotics had about 40 different nationalities. And here we focus on diversity initiatives such as job, but also on assignment-related transfers between ABB countries. The global market demands that ABB, as a global employer, is able to transfer our employees across borders for assignment-related work, but also to visit customers and to perform work at customer sites. Immigration rules, however, tend to be a long-ridden process with up to 4 months handling time for a third country national coming to Sweden. In a competitive market, it is crucial for ABB to be able to transfer and employ staff with the right skills and competences with reasonable speed. Customer demands shorter delivery times, and therefore flexibility in immigration rules would support skills transfer and increase productivity. Finally, ABB Sweden is very fortunate to be able to provide opportunities for employees due to sound employment law and regulations. However, in a global market, we also have an increase in global position holders who work in various countries independent of their main residence. And our experience is that work environment and related regulations become challenging to enforce in a global marketplace, especially for these kind of global position holders. So harmonization of people policies across various countries would support globalization of people, skills, and competences. So to summarize, globalization provides ABB with great opportunities for our employees, also for our business in terms of increased productivity. However, there are challenges with globalization, such as finding the right people for the right jobs, but also to get these people for the right jobs in the right time. Okay, thank you.
So we'll now have you all on the stage, and you are writing like I don't know what. you crazy. Like crazy. I didn't want to say that. So please stand here, all of you.
Yep.
Karin, what was most interesting for you in Stephanie's report?
It was really interesting to learn about the gap in skills, because that is part of our experience, that we see there's a slight gap between the skills that we're looking for in our recruitment compared to what's available in the local market. Yeah. Mm.
Okay, you were writing like crazy. What did you write? You have to pick some. We don't have all time this day, but
no, I would like to answer some of the comments, because first we don't say that participation in GVC is good. We really try to see how countries through their policies can make the most of global value chains. We don't have this type of statement. And I would like also to comment on this avoid picking winners, because I fully agree. And what we do is really we look at the historical trends and we look at whether the skills characteristics of the countries match these trends. We don't indicate any direction for changes. And then in terms of policy, we really look at the best policy, the best skills policy. I mean, improving the quality of education and training system, building strong adult learning systems. So, and we really argue that investing in skills is a double dividend strategy, because, as you said, I mean, skills is good for many other types of things. While, I mean, saying having an industrial policy really focusing on a specific area is very dangerous, while investing in skills can give you positive impact on various aspects. So that's what I've noted, and I was also very interested in seeing ABB Robotics also trying to have some internal policy for developing the skills of of their people, which is the very important aspect. I mean, building this and perhaps I suppose there is some cooperation between the company and the Swedish government or some university, and that's, I think, very important policies in this area.
Yeah, what about that? Is there a
Yes, there is. We have cooperations with Swedish universities, so there is a lot of activities going on where we're trying to recruit, of course, candidates from local universities. I think, however, it would be really interesting to understand how we can expand it and maybe work on a European level and get a better cooperations with universities outside the local market, and also how can we make immigration rules fit with that cooperation so that we can actually bring in foreign students to Sweden without having to apply for long work permits that takes a few months to get in place.
Yeah, it's a big discussion, but do you have some clue about that, how to do it?
Unfortunately not, but I fully agree that there is a need for more cooperation. But it's also, I think what we say in the report, it's also important to better understand the cost and benefits of cooperation in education. I mean, there is some countries are losing. I mean, if their students go to some other countries, I mean, they are losing their investment. They may benefit because in the end, these workers may develop some type of business that will benefit the countries. I mean, so we need to better understand a bit the distribution of cost and benefit between countries to build more cooperation.
Okay. Yeah, Fredrik, and then we have a question.
No, yes, comment on the education part. I mean, if you look at the development of universities in Sweden, there has been tremendous internationalization. If we compare the number of foreign students now and 10 years ago, it's a big increase. And I think one of the interesting aspects is that it now costs money if you're from outside of the European Union. Within European Union, it's for free. Outside European Union, it costs money. The good thing is that, that has put pressure on the quality. If as soon as you start to charge people money directly, and there's an incentive for us at economics department to get these students, we have to provide good education, and I think that has been very, very positive. I think so a lot of foreign students coming here. I think maybe what one could work on is, simplifying their visa requirements, so forth, after they've had their education here. But a lot of them are staying and are benefiting the Swedish economy.
But some of them don't come because there is a cost.
There is a cost, yeah. There's a cost. But on the other hand, I think it's fair. Why should Swedish taxpayers pay education for people all over the world who may later leave and not? I think that's fair.
ABB. Okay, so the question from you, please. You have the microphone there.
Thank you. Yeah. So this is the downfall of not being able to ask the question directly because the question just grows in my head. So thank you for the digest. Great, all of you.
Could you please just say where you are from?
Yes, mig som Sadek, I represent Teknikföretagen, the Association of Swedish Engineering Industries. I'm an analyst/economist there for now. Question is, when it comes to policies in Sweden, we talk about global value chains, right? And would it be fair to, these presentations are great because you pretty much identify the needs. And one of the needs could be policies, shift in policies. But aren't general policies maybe are not as good as specific policies to different sectors? Because if we talk about global value chains, Sweden is good at X, Y, and Z, and other countries are better at other sectors in the economy. Would it not be a flawed view to sort of promote generalized policies when maybe we should focus, especially in a growing public sector that Sweden has, maybe we should actually mandate more humans to be more specific to the S&I codes that we all know the different sectors and accelerate policy change for some sectors over others in order to support the global value chain that Sweden in part stands for.
Yeah, okay. Who wants to comment?
Yeah, I think, I think if I understand it correctly, you say that maybe general policies is not as good as special treatment policies. I think that what we've seen historically is that the problem with special treatment policy is that it's so difficult to know what's going to be high growth in the next 2 decades, okay? So we might have a hunch, okay, maybe it's robots, maybe it is, but we don't know. It could be that, US is taking over the whole industry in 5 years from now or whatever. We have seen that over and over again. It's also the case that when you have this special policy to some industries, what happens? Well, suddenly it becomes more important for ABB or for other firms to have good relationship with the politicians and to lobby for support and subsidies and so forth than to work on the production. So, yes, in theory and so forth, I think it might be a good idea. But in practice, I think that there are more failures than successes when it comes to these special treatments. So that's why as you can hear, I'm inclined to go for the general good policies.
Okay. Do you want to comment on that? You are a practitioner.
Well, I am thinking of one example. For example, when in terms of moving people between countries, so we're sending our own employees to customer sites on a regular basis, and even bringing people here to maybe attend projects and do work here on a temporary basis. So here, as a global employer, we would, of course, very much like to see a change in terms of, getting more speed into the migration policies, which could be just a one way to do maybe a policy change that could impact on the business here in Sweden in terms of just being able to visit clients outside of Sweden, but also for our skilled staff to come here and work on projects. So this is something that we spend a lot of time trying to coordinate and manage from HR perspective. So this is just one example that I had in mind in terms of policy change. Yeah.
Okay, so we have one question here, the lady in the middle.
I'm Lina Hagman from Almega Employers Organization for Service Industries. I'm chief economist there. I have to point out that there is a risk of misunderstanding the specialization in connection with the global value chains if we separate the specialization between industries, since it's all about the interconnection between industries. And we have seen this especially in Sweden, that the manufacturing industry has really specialized very much. It's still going on. It has increased since the financial crisis, that our manufacturing industry is the most intensive. It has specialized more and more into service production, but the job creation has been, especially within business services. So especially in the past couple of years, we have seen a great job increase within business services in connection with this ongoing specialization. So it's wrong to say that we should focus on, as Fredrik says, on separate industries, since we see the connection between the business services also with the manufacturing industry and with the rest of the economy, and also the job creation there is also thanks to increased demand for those services from abroad. So there is, you should learn how jobs are created thanks to this ongoing specialization.
Okay, so
do you understand my point?
Yes. Do you want anyone to comment on that?
Yeah, because I think there is perhaps a bit of misunderstanding, because this is exactly first. This data on specialization. They take into account global value chains. It's data in value added terms. It's not the old indicators of specialization. There are new indicators that take into account the interconnection between industries. And I was really showing exactly this, and that there is a decrease in specialization in some high-tech industries, but an increase in the complex business services, which reflects exactly what you were saying. So we fully capture it. And when we look at employment growth, I should perhaps have been more precise, we look at global employment growth. We don't look specifically by sectors, exactly because of what you said. I mean, because of all this movement, I mean, this creates some increase in employment, not necessarily in this industry, but in another industry. So this is what we look at, and that's yes.
Okay. We have another question here. I don't know if you shortly would say something. No. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Carl V. Hamilton. I'm an economist, but also linked to the European Commission. My question is to Stéphanie from OECD. I mean, the real gainers from global value change are the poor countries, especially in Asia. They have taken care of very simple, unsophisticated parts of the production chain. Now, then you can divide it up, let's say, in 5 parts and 10 parts and 20 parts, etc. But there is a limit to that. I mean, do you see, and since you have gone through all these data, do you see any signs that the possibility of expanding global value change is being exhausted, so that, in fact, we have now a mature situation, and poor countries will stay poor, since they haven't entered early enough. And my second question is, how do you avoid that everything will be colored by the American experience with the Rust Belt and so on? After all, 80% of jobs lost are due to technological change, not international trade and global value change. I think that is very important. Otherwise, the whole discussion will tip over to America only, not just America first.
Okay.
It's not. Yes, they are not easy questions. First, so on low-income countries, we don't concentrate on these countries because we don't have data on skills. So they are integrated when we look at all these trends on specialization. But we don't study this country. We don't have the data on skills, so they are not incorporated in the analysis. So I cannot answer Well, I know that there are some papers that, of course, have shown that poverty has decreased in these countries, but I can't say what is going if this is going to continue or not. This I don't know. Second, that's the problem when I don't write.
To avoid everything covered by the US.
Yes, I mean, I know. The other issue, which is an important one, is the future of this global value chains. And indeed, there are some uncertainties because with automation, perhaps some activity will be bring back in countries, especially if you have some protectionist measure. But in this case, this will not necessarily bring job, as you said. So I think all the recommendations that we have on skills, they are also important to address the issue of automation. And so that's one argument. But on the other hand, you have all the possibility to fragment the production process in the service industries that has not been exploited so much. So some people argue that there may be more development in global value chain in the service industries. So I think there are some uncertainties on this.
Okay, thank you. The American discussion has to end this day here at SNS, but not really, because Mikael is going to say a few words first before we split up.
Yes, thank you. On the behalf of SNS, I would like to thank Stéphanie, Fredrik, Karin and Helena for joining us today.